Despite having beaten Five Nights at Freddy's 4 a number of times over the years, it's a game that consistently leaves me terrified whenever I play it. I'm sure a lot of the fear it inspires comes from its gameplay. In order to survive a night, you have to constantly bounce between 4 different locations and stave off 4 corresponding animatronics, all of whom are trying to kill you. Bonnie and Chica try to get into your room through the left and right hallway doors, and they absolutely have to be kept out at all costs. But you'll also want to try and keep Foxy out too. He starts out in the hallways with Bonnie and Chica, but he can slip into your room and hide in the closet when you aren't looking. From there, he'll try to make his way out and kill you, but you can push him further back into the closet by shutting the doors on him. This is not a permanent solution, though. The moment you look away from Foxy, he'll try to get out again. So on top of having to check both doors for Bonnie and Chica, you'll also have to periodically close the closet so that Foxy doesn't get out. Oh, and don't forget to check for Freddy, either. He hides under the bed behind you and will jump out if his frettles are active for too long. Trying to juggle all 4 of these animatronics at once is extremely stressful, and any victory against one animatronic will only bring momentary reprieve. Perhaps even none at all, depending on how dire your situation is. You've successfully blocked Chica, but the lights are flickering. Someone else is about to kill you too. But who? It could be Freddy, but you haven't checked on Foxy in a while either, and there's always the chance that Bonnie is right outside your door. Moments like these become especially frequent the further you get into the game, and they can spur on total panic, notions to move faster in order to survive, but playing with such frenzy will only increase the likelihood of death. Notably, there's no easy way to deal with Bonnie and Chica. You can't shine your light at them while they're outside your door, at least not without any consequences, and instead you have to listen for the sound of breathing, which indicates immediate danger. This breathing isn't always instantaneous, though. Sometimes it's delayed, and it also isn't very loud either, so you really do have to take your time and listen. Which can be quite stressful when you have so little time to spare. But FNAF 4 isn't just mechanically stressful, it's also psychologically stressful. Just like in the first 3 games, the player is confined to a single room. You can't run, and you can't hide. You just have to sit in one spot and defend yourself. Simply put, you're cornered, and this is an inherently disadvantageous position to be in. Your only way out is through direct confrontation with the animatronics, regardless of how dangerous they are. If given the option, I think a lot of people, myself included, would rather run away or avoid these animatronics instead. That's what would feel safer, less dangerous. But there is no escape, and that's very anxiety-inducing. For me, this also means I often have to suppress my instincts when playing FNAF 4. Every time I go up to one of the hallway doors, I feel like my entire body is screaming at me to stop, that what I'm doing is stupid, that I should be staying away from the danger, not running towards it. But I know that I can't do nothing either. Inaction will also result in death, so I just have to swallow my fears and continue on. One thing that I ought to mention is that if Bonnie and Chica aren't at your door, then it's best to shine your light down the hallway, as this will scare off anything undesirable headed your way. This comes with a huge risk, though. Perhaps you didn't listen hard enough, and through the darkness, death could be lurking mere inches away. That pause you have to take before deciding whether to turn on the flashlight or close the door is infinitely more unnerving than any jump scare could be on its own. You'd think that knowing a jump scare could happen would make it less scary, but it really doesn't. In fact, I think it actually makes jump scares more scary. Sure, a sudden loud noise and a spooky face lunging towards the screen is startling, but it isn't really scary, whereas the anticipation of a jump scare will start to build tension, and as that tension grows and grows, you'll start to become more on edge and afraid of what might happen next. This is especially apparent with the Fun with Plush Trap minigame that occurs between each night, which is essentially just a deadly game of red light, green light. Whenever your light is off, Plush Trap will sporadically start to make his way towards you, and your goal is to stop him on the X directly in front of where you're sitting. If you succeed, then you'll automatically get to skip the first 2 hours of the next night, which is a pretty great reward. However, if you let Plush Trap get too far, he'll kill you. In the past, I would often chicken out while playing this minigame by just letting the timer run out. I genuinely hated it that much. Staring into the darkness, waiting for Plushtrap to get closer and closer and closer. It was just so nerve-wracking. His footsteps are super quiet too, so you really have to crank up the volume to hear him. And your instincts might even goad you into leaning towards your screen to hear him better, but this'll just make his jump scare that much more frightening. Truthfully, this minigame still freaks me out, and even though I've gotten a lot better at it, sometimes my fear gets the best of me, and I don't even try to win. In the moment, it gives me an easy out, but it ultimately just ends up making the next night less easy. To try and overcome my fear of FNAF 4, I've spent a lot of time learning all of its different mechanics and intricacies, hoping that by making all of its unknowns known, the game would become less scary to me, and it somewhat did. I definitely don't die as much as I used to, and I can also act more rationally in stressful situations, but that stress still comes from an underlying fear of the game. And even though I know all of the mechanics, some things in FNAF 4 are still completely out of my control. Just because I know I should keep Foxy out doesn't mean I always can. If Bonnie's at the left door and Foxy is at the right door, then there's no other choice but to let him in, and I can only hope that such a situation does not arise. Fredbear also sparks similar feelings of helplessness in me as well. On the surface, having only one animatronic to deal with rather than 4 seems like it would be easier, and for the most part it is. His movements are loudly telegraphed, and if you think he's at a door, you can even check with a flashlight to see if he's there first before closing it. But eventually, he'll stop playing fair. Fredbear has a fake-out mechanic to trick you into thinking that he's in your room, and while you waste time checking the bed and closet, he'll go in for the kill. What's worse is that there's almost no way to tell when Fredbear is tricking you or not. The laughs which indicate that he's in your room and the laughs which mean nothing sound exactly the same, so you just have to guess what he's doing, and if you guess wrong, then it's game over. Fredbear is 100% the most unfair animatronic in the game, but that's what makes him scary. He's totally uncontrollable, a force which you are powerless against. I'm sure the general lack of control, the stressful mechanics, and the often unknowable nature of FNAF 4 play a huge role in what makes it so scary to me. But I think there's something else too, an aspect of the game that affects me on a subconscious level. This house, this ambience, it all feels so familiar. The toys scattered across the floor, the outdated wallpaper, the sliding closet, the sound of crickets chirping, wind chimes rattling against each other, a dog barking outside, and even the chime of an old grandfather clock. All of these things remind me both of childhood and of my grandparents' house, a place that I often visited when I was young. But in FNAF 4, all of these familiar sights and sounds have been warped and twisted into something more sinister. The rooms are draped in shadow and darkness. The calming sound of the crickets and wind chimes is mostly drowned out by a low, unsettling hum, and the toll of the clock instills a sense of impending doom. This combination of the nostalgic and the macabre gives FNAF 4 a uniquely disturbing atmosphere. I particularly like the contrast between the animatronics and their environment. They stick out in a way that is quite striking, and while their designs are definitely over the top, they feel fitting for a game where you seem to be playing as a child. When you're young, it's easy to imagine that some horrifying monster could be lurking down a dark hallway, or hiding in your closet. I can't be the only one who needed it to be closed before going to bed. Honestly, FNAF 4 reminds me so much of my childhood fears. I mentioned before how I would frequently visit my grandparents' house, and for the most part I liked it there, but I absolutely hated their basement. It was down this long flight of stairs in the corner of the house, and when you flicked the light switch, only a single light at the bottom turned on. There were other lights in the basement, but to turn any of them on, you had to physically rotate their bulbs around, and as a child, I couldn't reach them. So most of the basement stayed dark, only illuminated by one light bulb and a few stray rays of sunlight that would filter in through the curtains of two small windows near the ceiling. This light made things more visible, but it still couldn't pierce the darkest corners, and it cloaked everything in shadow. Near the bottom of the stairs, there were a few shelves hung along the wall, and each held a row of old dolls, whose gazes were always empty and unwavering. Pictures were dark, their contents inscrutable, all except for one, a large black and white picture of Jesus nailed to a cross. I was terrified to go down into that basement, and yet I still would, for there was a freezer down there that always had cookies in it. And wouldn't you risk it all for such delicious treats? Sometimes I could muster up the courage to dash down to that freezer and nab a few cookies from it, but other times I would just stand at the top of the basement stairs, staring down into the darkness and unable to take a further step. Perhaps those cookies could wait. I still go to my grandparents' house from time to time, and of course, now I know there aren't any monsters waiting for me in their basement. But even still, whenever I'm down there, a small prick of anxiety stabs at the back of my mind. What if there is something hiding in the dark? But I can't let that anxiety control me. And even though Five Nights at Freddy's 4 still scares me, I'll always come back to it. I need to face my fears and accept the risk of getting scared or hurt. I can't just run away. I might get caught in a stressful situation, and things might not go the way I want them to, but that's okay. I've just gotta roll with it, go with the flow, and see where I end up. If I fail, I can always try again, and eventually, I'll succeed.